This is one of those cases that doesn't make sense no matter how many ways you look at it. Ellen Greenberg, she was a 27-year-old woman living in suburbs of Philly. She was a first-grade teacher. She was found dead in her apartment with more than 20 stab wounds around her head, neck, chest. I mean, places that it seems almost impossible that someone could do to take their own life. Yet, authorities ruled her death a suicide. For more than a decade, her family, parents, her friends have been fighting to have her death re-examined. It just was, and you're not going to believe the result. This is Uncovered. It seems to defy reality. How did Ellen Greenberg have more than 23 stab wounds with a kitchen knife all over her head, down the back of her neck? When police arrived at her apartment in January of 2011, Ellen still had a knife in her chest. Initially, police ruled her death a homicide. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. But after the medical examiner got more information from police, the death was changed from a homicide to a suicide. Ellen's family and a lot of other people, not just people who knew Ellen, say it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem possible. But the district attorney's office says there isn't enough evidence to pursue, at least right now, that this was a homicide. The DA's office says, look, this case isn't closed. It's basically in an inactive status. And if some information comes forward that will allow them to pursue a homicide angle, they will do that. But for right now, it's on hold. But we are learning that the federal government may be looking into how local police and local authorities handled this investigation. A group of filmmakers and journalists recently took a deep dive into Ellen Greenberg's case, and really they're trying to look at what may have swayed. Could something have happened that caused this ruling to be changed from a suicide to a homicide? The doc does not hold anything back. We have with us now Nancy Schwartzman. She's the director of Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg. You can watch it on Hulu. Nancy, tell me, overall, what do you think about this case?
You know, it just so happens I'm from the neighborhood and area where Ellen was killed, right? I grew up and played tennis in Manayunk. I know exactly where those apartments are. I used to drive past them to go play tennis as a kid. I suddenly was kind of brought back to where I grew up and the kind of community and networks and so it felt very close to me. And then, the trove of all the materials related to the case felt really damning and really tangible. We're not grasping at straws to pull this story together. This is 14 years of a family's fight. These are many, many people getting involved to try to expose the truth that are not related to the Greenberg family. So many people could sense there's something really wrong here, that it felt wow, we have a really passionate community around this case that want to see the truth. And it felt like a really powerful opportunity to expose what feels like a really big injustice.
And the injustice, Nancy, here in your opinion, and the opinion of a lot of other people, is that someone killed Ellen. That person is known to people and has never been charged.
Look, there are so many jaw-dropping moments and failures in this investigation that you're reading about it, you're hearing it, and you're like, oh my God. And then. And I didn't want to make a project that was and then, oh my God, then they cleaned the crime scene. Then they took technology out of the crime scene. Then they reclassified it a suicide, without making sure that Ellen and her family were at the center. So really my goal was we can never lose sight of her humanity. We can never lose sight of what was lost. we can never lose sight of the heroism of these two parents that never got to grieve their daughter. And I also wanted to make sure we were not trafficking in conspiracy theories. We were not trolling, Reddit and, getting all in there with people crafting opinions not based on, the autopsy photographs, for example, or a knowledge of Ellen as a person. So while our larger true crime community is so important, they're so engaged, they really believe in justice, I always want to be careful. Anyone can come up with any theory, any opinion, whatever. So I wanted to make sure we were working at the highest level of journalistic integrity and not sort of, dipping into these intriguing, theories.
But it's not a theory in your mind that Ellen did not take her own life.
No, my God, no, absolutely not. And here are the very tangible reasons why. Number one, the doctor that she saw only 3 times, which is not really enough to build a relationship if you are seeing a therapist. We all know 3 sessions, my God. But that therapist who was analyzing for her psychological state said very clearly, I do not see ideation here, suicidal ideation. I don't think she's a risk. Sam Goldberg, her then fiance at the time, told police she had never mentioned wanting to harm herself in a police statement. So all of her friends were concerned that Ellen had changes to her behavior. However, none of them were worried about her taking her life, right? So no one was on high alert that this is like, oh my God, I'm really, 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 really worried about her. And number 2, the wounding on her body is so off the charts, non-suicidal. Even in that re-examination, they said, while we say it's unusual, it's like, no, it's nearly anatomically impossible to stab yourself that many times. Why would you stab yourself in the back? Why would you stab yourself in the front? It's such a violent way to do it. And then I think aside from the wounding that feels so unlike suicide, there were also 30 bruises on her body and bruises that indicated that she had also been choked. There was wounding to her strap muscles. So that is not inflicted on yourself, or what else could that be indicative of? Right. And why are we not asking, why were those questions not asked?
I know the medical examiner was forced to do a review of Ellen's investigation, and that's because her family sued the city, and so they were forced into that. And as a result of that, just a few months ago, I was pretty surprised that the medical examiner stood by the ruling that this was a suicide and not a homicide. The medical examiner points to there's no signs of foul play. And according to the medical examiner, and I guess some scientists, medical professionals, it is possible that Ellen could have inflicted these wounds on herself. And they describe some of these wounds as hesitation wounds. The ME also says in this report that Ellen was suffering from anxiety and that some of this anxiety may have stemmed from her work as a teacher. Nancy, what was the family's reaction to this ruling? I'm sure that they were hopeful that maybe the ME would come back with an undetermined ruling or maybe even changing it to a homicide.
It's very hard to ask the same institution to give it a cold, hard look and then take responsibility if they find mistakes, right? So it doesn't surprise me, and it really feels like an outside agency would be far more useful and thorough.
So Nancy, what's next?
Yeah, the plan is to, try to do everything we can to support the wheels in motion to get justice for Ellen and her family. Absolutely everybody involved feels very close to the story and the family. And no one, look, I would never say I know what happened. I don't know what happened. There were not cameras in the apartment. There are not cameras in the hallway. We just know there's just a common sense gut feeling that audiences all have that this is wrong and that you're not buying it.
Nancy's right. We don't really know what happened to Ellen Greenberg inside apartment 603. But I have to tell you something. As someone who has covered crime for more than 2 decades, it is extremely rare, almost like unheard of, for a medical examiner to change a manner of death from homicide to suicide. I actually don't think I've ever seen it happen. And so I do think these are valid questions. What caused that to happen? Was there a reason that happened? The reason for these questions is not just because of Ellen Greenberg's case. What people in this country don't understand is that a medical examiner who's making these decisions day in and day out all across the country in your local town, your community, they have incredible power with these decisions, because these decisions drive what police do, what prosecutors do. And so I believe this is a healthy discussion to question, was there something that happened here? Are there ever times that medical examiners are influenced by bias or pressure? For more true crime stories with depth, accountability, and impact, go to Us Weekly's YouTube channel or check out uncoveredwithkristenthorne.com.